Welcome back, Exes and T podcast fans. Hey guys, I'm really excited to be back with you guys today. Um, I'm really excited about this topic. This topic has been something that not just myself, but so many people that I talk to have had questions about, or just the topic always comes up about mental health, right? And we're always wondering and have so many questions. How do we take care of ourselves after we get out of maybe a DV relationship or out of a cult like environment? So I'm just going to get this little disclaimer out of the way on the off chance that I do talk about Amway worldwide, BWW, URA, any of these other different lines of affiliation. It's purely based on my personal experience, my guest's personal experience. We're not here to defame anybody. We're not here to make you guys look bad. Okay. If you want to join these organizations, if you are a part of something that you love or you're an adult, make your own decisions. Okay. Okay. Don't sue me. But with that being said, you guys, I'm really excited because I'm just so grateful for everybody who has been wanting to come on here, for everybody who has shared their stories, for everybody who has shared the podcast and continue to be supportive. Because of you guys, people either continue wanting to come on for the first time or people who want to come back. And I'm actually really excited because the person we have today is somebody that we've had before. So I would love to reintroduce you guys to Rebecca from the Analuia podcast. Hey, Rebecca, thanks for coming.
Hi, Danny. I am so excited to be here today.
I have enjoyed getting to know you and getting to talk to you. And today we're actually here to talk about mental health and this whole importance of self care. And why is it that we can ask you some of these questions?
Yeah, so I am actually a counselor in training, which means that I am currently going to school for counseling. So I've gotten several classes under my belt. All of the first class that we do is like legal and ethics, and so talking about all of the sort of legal stuff in the background. But yeah, so there's lots of learning, lots of things that I have access to. Um, and yeah, I guess that's it. Counselor in training.
Yay. Well, that's exciting. So, I'm really excited because we actually kind of talked about this a little, like briefly last time on your new career adventure that you are kind of embarking on after being a part of Amway. And especially after being a part of Amway, but especially being super busy in your personal life and going to school and being all of these different things, why is self care so important?
Oh my goodness. Self-care is incredibly important. And I know that you hear just in media in general, social media, all over the place about self-care. And typically it looks like pampering yourself. And that's not always true. That's part of it, but there's so much more. It's making sure that you're taking care of yourself. The idea is that if you don't take care of yourself, then you're not as effective as you could be in your daily life, helping others, your work, your whatever it is that's going on. So that's why it's so important. And there's lots of different techniques that you can find, and we can definitely talk about some of those things. But yeah, self care is really important so that you can have a happy, fulfilled life and be the best that you can be, and enjoy the relationships around you to the best of your ability.
Yeah, and it can be hard, especially if you're coming out of. And if you guys aren't familiar, if you guys haven't listened before, the way that I actually met Rebecca and her husband was they were actually in Amway years ago, and they were in URA, and she kind of has that same perspective of a lot of us who were a part of Amway and this need to heal from it. If you guys have not been a part of an organization like Amway, I'm really excited for you. But number two is there really is a lot of healing that has to come from an organization like that, no matter how long you're in. If you're even just exposed to one meeting, I really truly believe that you kind of take something away that feels so icky, at least from a lot of the people that I have spoken to. And what did that journey kind of look like for you from maybe being a part of something like Amway and having that belief system and then kind of switching gears to it's okay to go to college and it's okay to pursue this other career path?
Yeah. So, um, man, Amway, listening to other people's stories, I'm like, "Oh, okay, it wasn't that bad, our experience, but that can be such a trap to think that like, gosh, compared to these other stories, mine wasn't so bad. But Every story matters. So that's why I love what you do on this podcast, giving people a place to tell their story, because it takes a massive detox. Like they mess with your mind, organizations like this, um, and not just Amway organizations, but there's other organizations that do this. There are some like religious organizations that cause some severe trauma as well. Um, but yeah, so going through all of that and going doing the detox, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I want to be able to help other people through this trauma," because that's really what it is. It's trauma. And it took me a long time, honestly. It took me a long time to be okay with actually going back to school. It's something that I really wanted to do, but I was honestly, for me, it was mainly like a financial constraint. I was like, "Oh, can I do this? Am I gonna be good enough? Am I," all of those questions. And finally, I had a talk with my mom who was um, several months ahead of me in this program. So we're both actually going to school to be counselors. And,
Oh, wow.
so she yeah, it's really fun. All of my, research materials actually that I got for today's, chat, were from her personal library. I was like, "Hey, I know you got a lot of stuff on trauma. Can I borrow it?" So I went and raided her library. But she sat down, we had a conversation, and it was just like I had gotten to the point where I was so frustrated with not accomplishing anything in my life, it felt like, which is it's not
Yeah.
true, but, that's what it felt like. And so I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna do it." And, like, literally the next day, I called, I got set up in the program and everything. But, but I know that there can be so much shame and guilt around, going back to school or wanting to help people, or like, "Oh my gosh, am I too damaged?" I think a lot of people think that too of, "Am I too damaged? Like, I'm not okay, so how can I help other people be okay?" Um, and that's a good question to ask because we do need to look at ourselves. Honestly, one thing that I've learned going through this program is that, um, everybody needs, counseling, for sure. Although there's not enough counselors in the world, apparently, to, like so that's why psychoeducation is really important, like what we're having the conversation we're having today. Um, but but yeah, there can be a lot of shame and guilt around, not wanting to move forward and going back to school, and there can be a lot of questions around, gosh, particularly being in Amway, it was all about the grind. It was all about the hustle. And, people can be scared. We were even talking about this before we started recording. People can be really scared of getting lost in the hustle again. And number 1, congratulations on self-awareness. That's amazing. Knowing that that is a possibility for you and not wanting to do that, there are so many people who do not even recognize that they could get lost in the hustle. And so, good job on that. And then, second of all, you can control how fast, how much you want to do and to accomplish. You have that ability. When you're in, particularly from Amway, it feels like you're not in control in a way. Like they expect so much of people. And going back to school, you can set your own pace. You don't have to call 100 people or make a list or whatever it is that Amway, your group had you do. Um, if you're working full-time and you need to be part-time school, that's okay. You can do that. Um, that's what I had to do. The first semester that I took classes, I was full-time, for the first 2 semesters. And, I was not okay. I was really not okay. And so I had to take a step back and go, "You know what? I'm gonna be just fine going part-time." So if that's something that you wanna do, if you wanna go back to school and you're afraid of the hustle and the grind, just know you can accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. No one is No one's gonna have a gun to your head. You don't have um, force yourself to do anything. So yeah, that was a very long-winded
Wow.
answer, but
No, I love it. It's really good because and kinda like we mentioned before is that it is something that a lot of people mention is after being in something like Amway, whatever line of affiliation you are in, one, going to school was bad. Like, if you go to
Mhm.
school, you're somehow this failure who wasted your time, for one. And for two, they have this expectation that's immediately unrealistic, and it's that 2 to 5 year plan. You're gonna get diamond 2 to 5 years maximum. Most people are in for like longer than that, and they don't even achieve the platinum level. This is just a reality, and it's not anybody else's fault but theirs. But
Right.
being a part of that makes you feel like, "Oh my god, I couldn't do this in 2 to 5 years. I don't like and then it creates this I need to get done fast, which is not realistic at all. And I think that, being able to kind of take a look at the fact that it's okay to take your time to do these things because we're not in a rush. You don't have to be in a rush to do these things. And I know I'm guilty of being like, oh my gosh, like if I can't do it in 2 to 5 years, I don't want to do it at all. But that's not even possible to do in 2 to 5 years. And I really appreciate this reality of the situation because I'm telling you, you guys, if you guys haven't been a part of an organization like this, it really creates such a different mindset. And actually, something that you had said before that I really liked that you wanted to touch on is just how much trauma can change you as a person and how some of our reactions now might be different before we were in Amway.
Yes, absolutely. So, first of all, let's talk about what is trauma, because we've used the word quite a bit even now. So, trauma is, by definition, an unbearable and intolerable experience that causes a person to have an emotional response. That's intense. So, and not only does this cause an emotional response, but it also produces physiological changes, such as the brain's alarm system, increasing cortisol levels, which is your stress response. And then it alters the system that distinguishes relevant and irrelevant information. So that's a
Wow.
lot, right? That's a lot that happens with trauma. And and when we really think about it and you hear all of these experiences of Amway and things that have gone on, like that's traumatic. It really is. It caused you so much to have an emotional response like this. Um and it changes things in your brain. So why is this important? Why is it important to know that there's physiological changes? Um, so, individuals who experience trauma can have extreme responses to the day to day events. They can lash out. They can have, erratic behavior or crazy responses to things that are like, "Whoa, I just said hi." Like what's going on? Um, and oftentimes, people who've gone through trauma end up repeating the same problems without learning from their mistakes. Um, so this can come with a heavy dose of shame because you feel like you're stuck in the same patterns, doing the same things over and over again. And um, yeah, but what's nice to know is that these behaviors are a result of that physiological change. The changes in your brain's alarm system, to the increasing of cortisol and your stress responses being all out of whack, and altering the system that distinguishes that relevant and irrelevant information. So basically, like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you feel like you're erratic. You, um, it was those changes in your brain that happened as a result of trauma. Um, Now we all have personal responsibility that should always enter the conversation. But there are things that you can do to help regulate these emotional responses as a result of the trauma, um, which is really nice. So, um, and before we get too far into this, I will say Um, I would highly, highly recommend that you go see a licensed professional counselor. Um, do what you can on your own if you're not quite ready to take that step. There are things that you can learn through the internet, and some of the things I'm sure we'll talk about today. But I do believe it is really important if you just can't handle it yourself. And honestly, so many times you just need someone else's perspective. And even though I'm going through all of this counseling training, I actually see a counselor myself to work through things that I'm going through, so that I can be a better counselor in the future. And so I would highly recommend that you seek out professional assistance if you need it.
Yeah, professionals are really they're so valuable. I was definitely one of those people, and I will be 100% transparent about it. I hated counselors. I didn't wanna do it. I walked in with a closed fist, and I was like, "Listen, I don't wanna be here." And, being like that, though, and finding the right person who helped me break down my walls, probably one of the greatest things I ever did, because that counselor will always, like, stick in my mind as the person who, like, made it okay. He was like it was obviously, don't go cursing out just any counselor, but, it was really nice to be able to walk into this person who I was like, "Listen, dude, I don't I'm desperate. I am here. You are my last resort." And, like, being able to break down those walls with somebody was amazing, because then you start to really understand that that's actually what they're there for. They're there to be like, "Okay, so you're so traumatized, you don't even wanna talk to me. Okay, well, why is that? Like, what's going on?" And then it was just a matter of getting through all of that and explaining, "Well, why don't I wanna be here?" "Well, I've never really felt heard in my life." "Oh, okay, well, I do need to be here." So if you're one of those people, I promise you, I mean, obviously, I can't guarantee anything, but I really do think that you will be better off after talking to a counselor ahead of time or after the fact. But I'm really excited because these topics are some of the most important, especially here, because I talk about some very, very traumatic experiences, and we do go over some really heavy topics. And self care is something that is very important for everybody. But as somebody who does talk about these kinds of things as often as I do, I think it's important for people to know that I too take self care very, very seriously, and I take mental health very seriously. And earlier, you had actually said something about how self care, I guess, stereotypically looks like pampering yourself. Can we go over some of the examples that maybe self care isn't as advertised to be?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think we can all see some of the things that are talked about on social media and everything is, taking a bubble bath and drinking a glass of wine, reading a book, um, or getting that new skincare routine down, or these, all of those kinds of things. Basically, marketing, trying to get you to purchase more products. And those are good things. Bubble baths are great. I take baths, but it's more about listening to what your body needs. Now, if you're, you know, I was talking with someone and they were like, bubble baths are great, but if you're losing your mind and the only thing you can do is sit there and I don't know, sit in the bath and drink your glass of wine while you're so stressed out, like I mean, that's not maybe the best thing, like, check in it's more about checking in with yourself. What do I need right now? Now if your body is aching because you did a lot of painting of a room like I did yesterday, then, maybe put some Epsom salts in the bathtub and soothe those pains. That's taking care of yourself. Or if you're like, "Oh," all of a sudden you realize, "I am, um" really depressed for some reason. Like, I don't know what's going on. I just like don't really want to go outside or, those sort of depression feelings that come with that. And maybe you notice, wait a second, when was the last time I walked outside? And then you realize, oh, I don't really go outside and get sunshine. Well, maybe that's something that you can do. Go outside, be in nature, get some of that good vitamin D. Going on walks is great for you. Having exercise is part of self-care. That's a really good thing to do. It's But self-care is more about listening to your body, listening to your emotions, listening to, um, spiritual things that you need. So it's that so we talk about in counseling programs that there is a mind, body, spirit connection, and that all of these things and, like, general wellness things, those are all really important to cultivate. So those 3 areas, intellectually, how are you stimulating your intellect? Are you reading good books? Are you listening to podcasts? And not just for consumption's sake, but because you're really thinking about it. Or exercise. What are you doing for your body? What does your body need? And then spiritually, do you need meditation? Do you need to connect with whatever higher power that you are worshiping? It could be going out in nature. It could be, lots of different things, prayer, all of these wonderful things that are so important to cultivate your whole being. So it's more than just a good skincare routine. While that is good, it's more than that.
Yeah, that's something I'm really guilty of is, like, watching all of these different, like, I guess, content creators, and
Yeah.
they're there. And that's what they're advertising as what self-care is. I'm like, That does not fulfill me, and none of those things make me actually feel better." Like, sure, I'm doing them and I'm doing something actively, but none of those things have ever felt like, "No, this is what I need right now." So I really
Mhm.
like having these other different examples because, I mean, even when you go on Pinterest, self-care, the first thing that pops up is a routine that you can do for your skin, and it gives you a list of skincare products that you should have, or like you said, the bubble bath, or sitting with your book and your coffee. I'm not even a really big coffee drinker, but I like the fact that you mentioned um, being able to stimulate your brain and being able to like really understand all of these different aspects of yourself that need different things. And I love this because when we're in organizations like Amway, we are not supposed to be thinking about ourselves. That is the most selfish, quote unquote, thing that you can do is thinking about yourself. And there, not only do they discourage self care, but they heavily discourage sitting still with yourself for any period of time. Because if you're not grinding and you're not doing all of the things that they tell you to do, you're not going to grow. And that creates a lot of guilt. And did you ever have guilt after you got out of Amway, just kind of sitting still with yourself? I know a lot of people that I talk to are like, "I feel so guilty. I took a nap and I woke up and I felt so bad about myself afterwards."
Oh yeah, definitely. It took me so we actually left the organization. Um Josh was the one, my husband, he was the one that was like, "Rebecca, we gotta get out. Like, we can't do this." And, what's funny is that I'm sure most other people experience this, but they always preach that, the man is the head of the household and he makes the decisions for the family and all of these different things. And so following along with that, I was like, well, Josh is the head of the family, so I got to follow even though I don't want to leave because I was still so in it. Um we ended up leaving and it took a long time for me to detox from everything, and yeah, sitting on the couch was like, we can just sit here. We, we can watch TV. Like, it felt so guilty just sitting on the couch and watching TV, but it's like such a novel idea that we could do that. It was very strange for a long time, to not go out and be, pounding the pavement, getting people
Yeah.
into the business.
Talking to everybody, spearheading everybody, talking to I feel guilty even still to this day talking to my cashiers, like, "How's your day going?" And I'm like, "Please don't think I'm gonna get you into something. I swear, like, I'm just here trying to
Yeah.
ask you about your day." But what are some ways that we can kind of combat those feelings of the guilt of, like, "I know I need to sit still. I know I need to sit home today. I know I don't feel good, but something in me feels bad about that."
Mm. So it's good to notice. First of all, self-awareness is very important. Being aware of your emotions is the first step to recovery, I guess, the first step to figuring out what's next. So if you know you're feeling guilty, you're like, okay, I feel that emotion. That is, I can identify that emotion. Then maybe it's time to sit down and journal if journaling is your thing. I personally love journaling. Um, and it's really helpful for me to get my thoughts out on paper and to sometimes through journaling, I will discover like belief systems that have been buried down inside of me. And you can help to bring those to light. So journaling is a really excellent idea when you feel like you're really guilty or ask yourself questions like, okay, why am I feeling guilty? What is going on here? And then from there, really it's talking to yourself. That sounds kind of crazy, but it's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And so it's looking at how you're thinking. Okay, well, you're thinking that you're guilty because of this thing, and then you can kind of talk to yourself and say, you know what, that's not true. It's not true. I don't have to be going out there and doing these things. So it's reminding yourself that that is not who you are. You get to choose who you are, and you can help to kind of lay that guilt aside. And there's other things too. So one of the techniques, I guess, that you can use is or therapies is called something called DBT or dialectical behavior therapy. And there's different aspects of it. So it's learning um, mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, um, distress tolerance. Um, I forget what I've said. Distress tolerance, mindfulness, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. That's what DBT is. And it helps you manage those overwhelming emotions that you have, like guilt, or shame, or whatever it else is that you're dealing with as a result of trauma. Um, so distress tolerance helps to build up your resilience. So that's your the way that you handle things, you become your tolerance, it's your tolerance level. And then mindfulness is learning how to be present in the moment. So if you're already noticing that you're feeling guilty, um, you're being very mindful of what you're feeling. So that's good. And then emotion regulation, again, recognizing what you're feeling. And then interpersonal effectiveness, that's giving yourself tools to express yourself, such as creating boundaries, healthy boundaries, and creating these boundaries and being able to express yourself and your needs, while also protecting your relationship with others and treating them with respect. So that's all about DBT. Um, so we were talking about um, feeling guilty, emotion regulation. So there's different things that you can do. I've got these really fun little cards. Here, I'll pull out the emotion regulation section. Uh, Very
Oh, wow,
fun
there's quite
card
a few.
deck. There's a lot. Yeah, this deck is huge. Like I said, I borrowed all these from my mom, who's also going through the training. And she was like, "You should take these." I'm like, "Okay, great. These are helpful."
I love
Um,
it.
but there's different techniques. There's a lot of acronyms that go into a lot of these techniques to help you remember what's going on, or help you see what you need to do. Um, so, I mean, one of these things in here is the acronym PLEASED. So, some of the most effective emotion regulation skills relate to self care, which is what we're talking about. In dialectical behavior therapy, self care is captured in the PLEASED acronym. So, P, physical health, comes from going to the doctor as needed and following treatment recommendations. L, list resources and strengths for each part of the acronym. E, eat healthy foods in a balanced way. A, avoid drugs and alcohol. S, sleep enough to feel good. E, exercise every day, and D, daily practice makes a difference. So that's the pleased model for self care. And that's one of the things that helps you regulate your emotions. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I mean, that would be good to, like I feel like that'd be such a good, like, thing, and what's interesting is this might be triggering to anybody who's a part of, like, Amway or Worldwide or any of the different LOAs. I was gonna say it's a good Post-it note to put, somewhere that you can see it all the time. I say it's triggering because if
Yeah.
you guys were there, that they would tell us, write your affirmations, put them everywhere, write your dreams, your goals, which is not necessarily a terrible idea, especially when it comes to things that are reminders, but it doesn't have to be that Bugatti that you don't actually want. So just to let you guys
Yeah.
know. But I love that there's
Exactly.
something simple that makes this feel like, "Oh, it's not as complicated as I feel like it is." Because when something doesn't feel like I still feel weird, like saying that the self-care doesn't fulfill me, being able
Mhm.
to look at, like, even something as simple as a card with an acronym on it and kinda going through and like, "Oh, you know what? I actually am hungry, but I could probably use something like a fruit might make me feel better, or maybe I need to eat something a little bit lighter and healthier, or, I actually haven't been to the doctor in a long time. I should probably schedule myself an appointment. And even stuff like that, I never would have considered to be self care.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like so basic, but when you're not in a good headspace, you forget all of those things. Or, in cult-like environments, they teach you don't do that, basically. Um, so yeah, absolutely. And it's good to have these healthy reminders. It's important to remember too, I think that um while we're having about this conversation about what is self-care and these different things that you can do, um, it's not a checklist. You don't um, you get to choose what you want and need rather than making this, "Oh gosh, I have to do this. I have to do that." And then your stress levels go out the roof. And it's more about paying attention to your body, to yourself. What do you need in the moment? Getting good routines in is good. Eating healthy, having an exercise routine, getting good sleep, those are all really important things. But take the pressure off of yourself. Like this is not a checklist you have to complete. Um, I think that's important to remember because sometimes then we can start to feel guilty about not doing the self-care things, and then there's, "Oh, I'm such a terrible person. I'm so much shame around not doing
Yes.
these things." Yeah, and you know what? It's okay. It happens to the best of us. But it's more about noticing what is going on. That self-awareness piece is so important. And then adding whatever solution or tool that you need. So find the tools that work for you. While I have this entire deck of cards that have options of things, that you can do. Find what works for you. Because what works for me, like journaling is fantastic for me, but that may not be your thing. Maybe it's a video journal instead of writing. Maybe it's whatever it is that works for you personally. So it's a very, very tailored experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that you kind of sparked was something that you had mentioned before that I didn't even, again, I would have never known was a part of self care is setting boundaries. Now, when we're a part of Amway, if y'all know, they tell us, they give us an example that is totally false about what boundaries are, but we're supposed to put those with everything else and other people, including ourselves, but we don't have boundaries with them. Then we're supposed to live in what do they call it? Glass houses. We tell them everything. We go to them for everything. We can't do anything for the first time without even asking them. So there's so many different things that we're thinking are boundaries, but maybe aren't. Can you kind of give us some examples of what actual healthy boundaries look like?
Yes, I love that question. Because yes, boundaries are so important. Um, there are, oh my gosh, so many books on boundaries. What are boundaries? Um, but basically, a boundary is when you notice that you need, oh man, I'm trying to think of an example. Um, boundaries are like the way you structure your life. Um, if you know, we'll take food for an example. If you know that sugar is very addictive for you, then you absolutely have the right to say, and someone continues to offer you donuts or cookies or whatever, you, instead of feeling guilt when you give in, you can absolutely put up a boundary and say, hey, I am really trying to stay away from sugar, and I would really appreciate it if you didn't offer it to me. That's a boundary. So you can have that conversation with somebody in a very nice way. Most of the time, people are going to respond to whatever it is and be like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry that was causing you distress." Um and yeah, absolutely. I won't do that. And so that's a very benign example, obviously. There's other ways that you can put up boundaries, but it's looking at what is best for you and communicating in a positive, healthy way that this is how you need to put boundaries up. Um, in a more serious case, it could look like um, taking an example from one of the books that I read. Uh, it's two parents who came in for counseling to learn how to deal with their son who was staying at home. He was like 26 or something, and which is totally fine. By the way, let me just clarify that. Like, if you need to live at home, that's okay. No shame in what you need to do. I had to live at home for a while to get some stuff sorted out. But with their particular son, they were having trouble with he had some other like behavioral things that were going on. I think he was like bringing drugs into the house, or there was just like a lot. He's sleeping in all the time. He's using his money for different things. And the parents were like, I don't know what to do. Why is he, how do we deal with this? And boundaries was the answer here of like, well, I mean, you can putting up boundaries means that you are not letting someone else take advantage of you. And so this with this particular couple, they needed to set like, okay, you have, no more allowance. And that worked for them. Basically letting for this particular couple, it was letting their son fail and see what it was like to be actually on his own, to kind of learn and grow from that experience. But it looks different for different people. So it's more about protecting yourself, and those things that could be going on.
Yeah. So I do have a question, kind of on the same topic of boundaries. So I love that this is a healthy form of boundaries. Um, are there, I guess, what's the best way to kind of acknowledge whether someone is putting up a boundary or if somebody's trying to put up a control aspect? So, like, let's say somebody has like a narcissistic partner, or
Mhm.
they come from like an organization like Amway where they are having these narcissistic tendencies and they're saying it's a boundary, but it's really trying to control somebody. And how can we kind of differentiate between the two? Whereas it's okay to have healthy boundaries, but it's not okay for somebody to control you, if that makes sense.
That is an excellent question. Um, it's difficult. I'll just say I don't know exactly. I haven't gotten to that part of my training yet.
Okay. No
Um,
worries.
but I mean, narcissistic personality disorder is it can be very difficult to spot. Very, very difficult to spot. And you are not alone in like questioning what this is about. I think questions are good. Questions to yourself are saying, why is this person putting this boundary in place? Who is this boundary really serving? Um, is this harmful to me? Because while they can put up boundaries, you can put up your own boundaries. You know, if you're feeling like you've been gaslighted or gaslit, or or something like that, you start to question, or are they always, this narcissistic individual, um, are they uh I lost my train of thought.
It's
But yeah,
okay.
so there's some good there's some good questions to ask yourself, I think, in trying to figure out, um, is this a positive boundary or not? Um, Always looking at yourself and saying, is this best for me personally? Is this endangering me in some way? I think that'll go a long way into trying to figure that out.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the way that you answered that. And if you're questioning, go see a professional. Not to say that
Yes.
you're not, but it's really important that I think because that's something that I feel like in Amway we had so many examples of people like really like basically using these terms, but they're using them in a manipulative way to basically kind of control us. Like they would say, well, you need to set boundaries with your family. If you have a major function this weekend, you can't go to your family's funeral. You have to go to this major function. You're putting yourself first. You're creating boundaries, which is not a proper use of this term, at least in a healthy way. And I know for me, after getting out, especially somebody who I do have family members, I'm very open about this, who have narcissistic tendencies. I have a family member with borderline personality disorder who is somebody that I've had to cut out of my life because of these different things. And that was a boundary for me, was being like, you know what, I can love you from a distance, but this is harming me. It's not helping me, and it's not helping you either. And I think that's something that a lot of people too, they ask me personally, like, well, how does cutting off contact with somebody create a healthy boundary? That's for me, it's my parent. How that's your mother. And it's okay to do that. Right? Like it's okay
Mhm.
to set boundaries with people that or even people like in Amway. You don't have to talk to your ex mentor. If they try to add you on Facebook, don't. Like you don't have to do that. You can make your own decisions, but you can set those boundaries too. And I think that organizations like Worldwide or URA or BWW, they're really like creating this level of confusion for people when they leave to be so unsure of ourselves. And I guess another thing that I have to ask is how can we, I guess, work on trusting ourselves, trusting our intuition? Because when we're there, we don't have an intuition. We don't get to be our inner selves. Like we don't even have our own thoughts. When we come out, it can be kind of hard to be like, do I trust myself or do I have to go find somebody else to seek perspective?
Yeah, I think in this case, um, talking to someone would be really, really helpful, whoever that is. Obviously, a licensed professional is going to be best because they are trained to handle these things. But maybe there's somebody in your spiritual community who can be a mentor for you, who can talk with you about these things, um, or whatever community that you're a part of. Um, so that's one thing. Another thing is honestly, I know I keep going back to this, but journaling is a great way to know to figure out what's really going on under the surface there. Um, that really, really helps to take a look at what's going on. And yeah, learning to trust yourself again is difficult. Really, really difficult. And so often I think we can, myself included, we can get way off track in thinking that it has to be immediate. You were talking about earlier that 2 to 5-year plan, and, sometimes it just takes longer. It doesn't have to be immediate. I know we want to be better, like, instantly, but for most of us, it's a longer journey than that, and that's okay. It just takes a long time. I've described it to multiple people like our belief systems, our thoughts, particularly coming out of a traumatic situation like being in Amway, um, then it's like a ball of yarn that's all tangled up. And once you start pulling on one of the threads in the ball of yarn, you snag on another one and you find something else. And then, so it's your job to then kind of like try to pick it apart and untangle this crazy mess. And that just takes time. Anyone who's gotten, ladies in particular, or anybody who wears necklaces, if you get that thing tied in a knot, ooh, that is so difficult. Sometimes it is really tight. And you can spend a long time trying to undo the knots. Um, and, that's the way our brains work. That's the way, sometimes getting into that is really difficult. Learning to trust yourself again is really difficult. So I definitely want to affirm that's a lot. It's hard. It's a lot of hard work too, to do all of that, which is why going to see a professional to help with that, depending on the level of how is it a small knot or is it a large knot? Um, then they'll help you work it out. Oh no, I can't hear you again.
It wouldn't let me
Oh,
unmute
good.
myself.
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad it wasn't us this time.
Yay. No, it's a good time. I love to laugh. But anyway, so yeah, no, this is really helpful because I like I said, we talk about some really, really traumatic things here, and
Yeah.
people have this willingness to, be able to come forward and talk about their traumas. But like this whole idea of healing from it is extremely challenging. And I feel like sometimes, and a lot of people that I've talked to have been like, you know what, I've put it on the back burner for so long. I haven't wanted to acknowledge it. I haven't wanted to go through that necklace chain to untangle it.
Yeah.
And the fact that it can start with something as simple as self-care is
Mhm.
amazing because I feel like that makes it just a little bit more manageable because if it's something that I can start, the catalyst can start at home and that catalyst can eventually get you to a professional in their office. You don't have to be, stereotypically like laying on their couch. I mean, you could,
Mhm.
but you could very much just be sitting there having a conversation with somebody who is they're trained. They know what they're talking about. They know, they sometimes they don't know everything, but a lot of the perspective that they have purely based on their education, if they don't know the answer, as Rebecca has showed us, they'll tell you, I don't know. I have no clue. But there's a lot of perspective that can come with it. And ultimately, they'll be able to lead you to somebody who might be able to answer it. You might have to go through a couple of different people, but you don't have to only rely on one source. If you guys were in Amway, you guys know we had one form of communication, and that was up. We only had our upline. We only had our upline's upline. We could never go to crossline. We only had those people to rely on, and there's no checks and balances there. They're just going to tell you whatever they read in one of their indoctrination books or what they heard from one of their indoctrination speeches. And it sounds like this code of ethics that counselors follow, you're not going to have that. There are checks and balances. And just to kind of wrap things up, what is some, I guess, words of wisdom that you have for people who still might be struggling with this idea of why self care is so important?
Mm. Yeah, so before I answer that, I did wanna say to get to the right person to talk to, it's important to know what people in the mental health field actually do, um,
Yeah.
because it can be really confusing. Um, so you have therapists who and a lot of times counselor and therapists are used interchangeably. But you've got your therapists who are more specialized, like a marriage and family therapist. So they deal with marriage and family counseling issues. Then you've got social workers who they do counseling, but their primary focus is going to be on the community at large. So that's their focus is on the community. Then you've got counselors who are focused on they're more broad. There's more of your like general practitioners, if you will, primarily in talk therapy, but they can other use other specialties as well. And then you have psychologists who are studying the human mind and behavior and those kinds of things. And they will, and you have to be at a doctorate level. So you have to be, the others are master's levels. So psychology, to be a psychologist is at a doctorate level. and they are focused on disseminating information to the public generally about um, people, and like general information, like big, large studies of gender studies and things like that, as just an example. And then you've got psychiatrists who are the doctors of the mental health field. So they're MDs, they're doctors, um, and they are primarily focused on giving out medications to deal with whatever is going on with you. So those are the different um, types of professionals in the mental health industry, and they work interchangeably. And there's a lot of places too now. Like my mom, she's in her practicum and internship phase of her schooling, and she's actually working right now at a place that is uh, there's a term for it, but they're integrated. There we go. They're an integrated mental health facility. So they've got psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors, and they offer that sort of comprehensive care for mental health. So there's some awesome places like that out there, which is really, really awesome. And honestly, I kind of think that's where the field of mental health is going, is in those integrated facilities.
Yeah.
Um, so that's number one. Just knowing who to go to, getting to the right person is really important.
Yeah.
And with personalities, obviously that matters too, and different specialties within each of those. So there's that. So you asked a question about self-care, and for people who are still kind of like on the fence about it, why does it matter? Um, I think I said this in the beginning, but when you take care of yourself and focus on the things that you need, you become the most effective person that you can be. And it raises your happiness levels, your satisfaction with life. And you live a more fulfilled life. And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to have a more fulfilled life? Instead of being burdened by this shame and guilt that so often comes with trauma, you can live a free life. And what a beautiful, beautiful thing that is, to be able to do that, to have deeper relationships. We are relational beings, like that matters so much to who we are. And something else to be said too about professional counselors, to going to somebody who is trained within the code of ethics that we have and follow, which is very strict. It is very important to follow all of those things, and counselors who don't follow those code of ethics are punished, reprimanded. So it's really serious. There's several things to know. They're never going to force their beliefs. They shouldn't anyway. Force their beliefs and have all of those things and values, beliefs and values on you as the client. That is not their job. Um, and that's really important. Like one of the most important things that we talk about in every single class is about not imposing your beliefs and values on clients. So that means that counselors are not there to give advice. That's not their primary focus. Their primary focus is to ask questions, to say, "Oh, really? Okay, well, interesting. Tell me more about that. Like, what is it? What's going on there?" To be very inquisitive, but to let you come to your own conclusions. Um, One of the things we also talk about is the autonomy of our clients, that they are um, highly capable of making their own decisions. Hence the no giving advice. It's more questioning. And that's an interesting statement. I'm just kind of wondering, maybe this is true about the situation that you're going through, or have you thought about this? And they're there to be like a sounding board, to bounce ideas off of, to create goals that you want to accomplish. Why are you coming into counseling? Like, what is it that you hope to get out of talking with someone? So they'll work through all of those things with you. And they will give you tools to use that they think. Now, that I would distinguish that as not being advice giving. It's more of tools to say, here's when you feel this way, here's some things that you can do. So if you're needing some good tools, they're awesome at doing that. That was one of the things that I really, really appreciated in going to pre engagement counseling. We went through this whole process and we got tools on how to identify emotions and how to then communicate those emotions with each other. That was really life changing just to communicate about emotions. There's so many people who don't know how to even identify emotions. Um, and anyway, I have now talked a lot to answer that question, but I hope all of that was helpful.
It was, it really was, and I think kind of going back to knowing who to find in the field as well is so important. I think that it can seem very overwhelming when you're just entering this, "Well, I don't know who do I talk to?" There's so many resources available out there for you. I think the one that I mostly talk about is the domestic violence hotline, purely because that's a lot of the focus about what we talk about here, is they really can help you, and I will post that information when I post this. They can even help find a shelter in your area that offers counseling. There are specific counselors for domestic violence. There are specific counselors for cult healing. And if they can't help you, they can find a direction to point you in to find the right person for you. So if you're still overwhelmed after this whole conversation, I promise you, you will be able to get help. Like, no matter what, just if you're able to at least contact one person, one resource, that resource will spiderweb a whole different um, level of information for you. Hopefully, still not overwhelming. Because the way that I said that, and I'm like, oh, that's still overwhelming. Anyway,
Yeah, it's one step at a time, one step at a time. You do what you can by yourself. Maybe that's more comfortable. Maybe it is starting with journaling. Maybe it is starting with the getting those self-care practices, going on walks outside, literal like grounding techniques. I don't know if any of you have heard of grounding techniques. You like literally take your shoes off and go walk in the bare grass. Like, and that grounds you. There's something about the electrons in your body and the ground that helps to regulate things. Look at beautiful scenery. Studies have shown that looking at a beautiful scenery actually lowers your cortisol levels, like pretty instantly too.
oh wow.
And right, fascinating, fascinating stuff. Um, so yeah, it's little things like that can be a great way to start. And then is as you become possibly a little more settled, because sometimes it can just it's so much. It's so much. You start with one of those things. You start to relax a little bit and go, you know what? I'm okay to like work on myself now, you know, to dive deeper. Um, but but yeah.
Wow. Yes. Thank you so much for your time, for coming here and sharing all of the knowledge that you have with us, because this is such an important topic. And I think that it's one that I've wanted to cover for a long time. And having somebody who's quite literally in training, learning all of these things and going through therapy yourself, the perspective that you have is amazing. And you guys, the Analuia podcast, can you guys just kind of give us a little bit of a reminder of what you guys do and where we can follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, Analuia podcast. That is ANILUJAH. Took me forever to figure out how to spell that. But so we are on social media platforms of we're on TikTok now, actually, too. We do a lot of stuff on
Oh,
Instagram as well. And we're a podcast. We have a video version of our podcast. And then we also have an audio version. You can find those, the audio version on all podcast platforms. And then on YouTube, you can find us through Analuia. So on our podcast, we talk about animated movies and TV shows. That's everything from Disney to Japanese anime, sometimes little shorts that we find online. It just depends, but we watch those things and then we talk about it in relation to spirituality. So we talk about particularly for Christianity, but just general spiritual implications as well. And it's really fun. We have a lot of fun over there. It's just very conversational. We've got some really fun stuff coming up here soon. So I'm excited, looking forward to the future of what we're going to be talking about.
Which is really great. So if you guys like listen to something pretty heavy, go over there, listen to something fun. Find your favorite like Disney. They have so many Disney movies that are already out. Go find your favorite Disney movie, see what they have to say, and you guys are gonna leave with a smile because you're gonna be a little depressed from over here, but you're gonna go over there and you'll be happy. So, yeah, you guys, if you guys want to be like Rebecca, you guys want to come on here and talk about, we could talk about really anything, mental health. We could talk about your time in Amway or any other various cults that you were a part of. If you guys have a trauma story that you guys want to finally express, please just let me know. All you guys have to do is DM me on Instagram at xsandt.podcast. You guys can also email me, DANI at xsandtpodcast.com. Yeah. Okay. I'm not used to saying that one yet. I will eventually get there. But yeah, you guys can find me anywhere podcasts are heard. I'm slowly getting on the TikTok and the YouTubes and the stuff like that. But thank you guys so much. And thank you again so much, Rebecca. And we will catch you guys in the next episode. Gotta find the end the record button. There it is.